All right, welcome back. This is the third in our series of 4 lectures on Islam. Islam, to surrender, to submit to the will of God. This is the crux of Islam, that fierce monotheism. Yesterday, or in the last lecture, by the way, I wear earth tones for Islam. Islam is not a fancy religion. It does not go in for great design flourishes. In fact, if we were going to make that trip to the mosque, you would clearly have to be dressed modestly, especially the women. Not much skin showing. We'll talk more about that in the next lecture. No clothing with images, with human images on it of any kind. So I've been wearing the earth tones for my lectures on Islam. In the last lecture, we looked at the Quran. The Quran, the word for recitation, the teachings, the messages of Allah to us through Muhammad. Somewhat contextual, spanning 22 years, what's going on in those years. Sometimes those teachings are very specific to what's going on at the time. Sometimes they're more general. Remember the least controversial of the scriptures that we've looked at. It is the Word of God. It is written in first person, singular and plural. And when it's third person, it's God talking about himself anyway. So this is the essence of the Quran. Fiercely monotheistic. It sings the praises of God. It talks about divine design and how amazing this world is. Lots and lots of praise and gratitude throughout the Quran. Praise in particular. It honors all 3 faiths. Honors, in one list, 28 prophets, beginning with Adam. It tells the Adam and Eve story. It doesn't begin, because remember, it's not in any kind of historical context or ordering. But there is an Adam and Eve story. Interestingly, Adam is the first prophet. Adam is the first messenger. In Islam, there's that original sin is not an issue in Islam. Actually, yes, Adam sins. Adam and Eve together, which is very interesting, since we're going to get in the next lecture the treatment of women. But they sin together, and they repent, and they are restored. And Adam is restored to the level of a messenger, the first prophet. So 28 prophets, beginning with Adam. By the way, another precursor to the next lecture, all 28 are male. Now, I did mention yesterday that Mary is the only female name in the Quran as the mother of Jesus, but Mary is not a prophet or prophetess. Mary does not achieve that status. She is the mother of Jesus. Jesus is a messenger. Mary's virtues are extolled, but Mary is not exactly in the list of 28 prophets, the last of which is Muhammad. The honoring of all those prophets, the honoring of the 3 faiths, and what else is going on in the Quran It is calling people to righteous deeds. It is calling us to be righteous. Remember, there is another definition of Islam that comes from that word salam, or peace. We'll see how that plays out in the next lecture as well. But we are called to righteous deeds. There will be a judgment day. Your deeds and your time here will be judged. There is a heaven and hell. I read you some of those passages, and there will be a resurrection. That continuity in the three Abrahamic traditions, that continuity in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, whether it's the second coming, the Messiah, and you'll see where there's a Messiah even in Islam. We'll get to that in a moment. And the resurrection. So that's where we left off. And we have this recurring theme. What's the recurring theme? No specific successor, multiple opinions. So what happens in Islam following the death of Muhammad, 632 AD? We have what's happened every time we've gotten to this in the other religions. Who was he? What just happened? How do we interpret it? How are we now supposed to live? Now, clearly there were teachings left behind in this case, which becomes the Quran itself. But what begins to emerge for a while, over hundreds of years actually, is something called the Hadith. The Hadiths, or with an S, are this is the word for story. These are the stories. The stories is the best word I can think of. In particular, these are the stories of Muhammad. Remember, the Quran is not about Muhammad. The Quran is the messages he received to be passed on to us, to recite them, the recitation of them. This is the Quran. Muhammad may be mentioned 4 times in the entire Quran. Quran is not about Muhammad. This is where the Hadiths come in. This is a body of literature that includes stories of Muhammad, how Muhammad lived, the first lecture, Muhammad's life, what he did. I mean to tell you, some of these stories there's stories about him, sayings of Muhammad that are not the sayings that he is passing on to us. His teachings, his interpretation of what he was hearing, how he treated his daughters, how he treated other people, how he treated orphans. Remember, Muhammad was an orphan very early on. His father died before he was born. His mother died at 6. Then his grandfather died. Muhammad, there's a place in Muhammad's heart for orphans. Orphans, widows. He married a widow. Khadijah was a widow. These hadiths. Now, what has happened is that there have been over time, there are literally thousands of these stories, of these hadiths, but what has happened over time is they've been culled down. They've been it's been narrowed down into the ones. At one point, the argument is that they were reduced to about 40 that were could be considered somewhat authentic. From there, it was culled to 6. There are 6 traditional hadiths are considered authoritative, so to speak. That doesn't mean we use that word. We use the word in Christianity as canonized when we canonize the New Testament. Was to make it authoritative. These are the 6 authoritative ones, of which there are 2 major accepted hadiths with regard primarily to Muhammad and Muhammad's teachings. What happens is, from these stories, which are secondhand, they're not Muhammad's writings. These are secondhand stories about Muhammad, sometimes written. We have the same issue in Christianity. Gospels written, 40 to 90 years later. So things people remember, perhaps inflated, perhaps exaggerated, who knows. We end up with 2 major hadiths, and it is from that we get Muhammad as a model for living, the model of a Muslim, the model of someone who has surrendered to the will of God. Coming through the hadiths, and what it results in is something. So all of this results in, and remember we talked about no successor, multiple opinions. These are the stories. From that, opinions are formed. Now, in Islam, that is called collectively the Sunnah. Sometimes there's an H put on the end. The Sunnah. I'm going to put parentheses. It's not necessarily there. The Sunnah. The Sunnah is a word that means tradition. The tradition that comes out of how it begins to be manifested. Now, this is where some of the problems are. So, for example, these traditions can be cultural. There can be a different tradition in Saudi Arabia than there is in Iran. We're going to get to how it really breaks down in a moment when we talk about the branches of Islam. But the traditions begin to be developed. The rituals, how it is interpreted, these become the interpretations. It's not what Sunnah means. Interpretations. But it's how they're manifested. How it begins to be played out in normal life. This is the Sunnah. The Sunnah. And they are not, it's not universal. There's a different set of traditions in different countries. It's different in Northern Africa than it is in Indonesia. They can be very different across cultures. It is called collectively the Sunnah, the tradition. And this leads us now into a somewhat controversial subject. The subject is called Sharia. Sharia law. Sharia law, Sharia is a word for Islamic law. Now, interestingly, it's not what it means. This is pretty much how it manifests. It manifests as the law, Islamic law. Sharia, so you know, Sharia translated from the Arabic actually means, it's defined as straight path. Sometimes it's just ended there, straight path, but it means straight path to the watering hole. This is the image of Sharia. The straight path to the watering hole. We set the stage at the beginning of these lectures. This is a desert culture. This is the oases are the life-giving gifts. This is what the watering holes. This becomes in the Quran the image of heaven. This is it's the watering hole is what sustains life. And the idea is, go for it. This is what we do. We go for life. Straight to the water. Shortest distance between between 2 points is a straight line. The straight path to the watering hole. Sharia becomes the model of righteousness. Becomes a system of justice. Now, this is, in the West, this becomes, this is a lightning rod. So we actually have, it's really ridiculous, but there are communities in the United States that have literally taken upon themselves to pass a law for their community that basically says Sharia will never become the law of their community. This is Islam. There's this misconception of Sharia in Islam, especially in the West, that basically centers on Islamic law as being rigid and the classic eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Now, let me just go here for a moment and share with you the fact that, this is not simply Islamic. Let me read for you from Exodus. This is the classic line in Exodus. This is the Judeo-Christian tradition, for those that want to take it literally. This is Exodus chapter 21, verse begins in 23. It's basically 23 and 24 and 25. In which it says, "You shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe." This is the Western tradition. This is the Judeo-Christian tradition. We don't get uptight about that verse, that phrase. You know, it's there. We work through it. Proportional justice. We try and maintain some level of proportional justice. We don't take it literally. Let me read you one of the more famous verses from the Quran. This is Surah 5, verse 38. This is the one that says, this is the one that scares the West. As to the thief, male or female, cut off his or her hands, a punishment by way of example from Allah. That's from Allah for their crime. For Allah is exalted in power. Taken out of context, that's challenging. Taken out of context, Exodus is challenging. What's so interesting is that Exodus does not have the next verse, but the Quran does. What is the next verse? Verse 39, but if the thief repent after his crime and amend his conduct, Allah turns to him in forgiveness, for Allah is oft forgiving, most merciful. Don't you know that to Allah alone belongs the dominion of the heavens and the earth? He punishes whom he pleases, and he forgives whom he pleases, and Allah has power over all things. But if you repent, you're to take that into account. Even Exodus doesn't say that. Sometimes this gets thrown out of proportion. There's this fear going through the world on some level that Islam wants to conquer the world and impose Sharia law. Now, to further delve into this issue of Sharia law, first of all, know this. There really, on some level, is no Sharia law. The Quran, the word Sharia is, I think, once in the Quran. It's not like there's a body of rules or laws. That verse is taken out of, it's not in a context of all the rules of law. This is not what is found in the Quran. The Quran, this idea of Sharia, yes, there is this body of teachings. This Islamic law has developed. It is based in the Quran. The idea here is that Sharia is based on 4 different things. Sharia is based, number 1, on the Quran. You turn to, if the Quran has a teaching about it, this is the first place you look to if a judge is expected to judge a circumstance. First place they'll look is the Quran. The second place they will look, which is really where it's found now, is the Sunnah, the body of traditions. What's always been done? What's usually done? What's done in this culture? The Sunnah. The Sunnah has a big bearing. It's contextual. It's not this overriding, overly strict law. And if a judge cannot reach a decision, it will look then to 3, which is consensus. I don't know how to spell that. Consensus, which would basically say that S-E-N-S-U, I think there's more, there's S's. These are S's. S-U-S. Consensus, agreement. What do most people agree would be appropriate? This is one of the rules of Sharia. And finally, the judge is asked specifically to look to logic. Logic. What feels right? what seems right, what makes sense. This is the path, so to speak. This is almost not. It's not this straight. Sharia, that straight path, is a metaphor. We're to walk a straight path in life. We're to walk a righteous path in life. Absolutely. Straight path to the watering hole. But when we need to judge, this is the basis of Sharia law. Not an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth and cut off your hand, the hand of a thief. Yeah, it's in there. This is how it's applied. And remember what's also in there. And that is that forgiveness is available. Repentance is available. Those two elements that we talked about with both Christianity and Judaism. This is Sharia, not to be feared, not to be castigated, not to be demonized. We're demonizing this in some areas of the United States, and that's not fair. So this is some of the ways in which Islam has manifested, and now let's talk about the two big branches. So, because opinions flourish, because there's no total agreement, and we've seen this because there was no specific, and now we're going to talk about specifically this issue of a successor to Muhammad. For this, we have to go back. We go back to the story. And remember, I told you there would be two important little elements. Namely, who was Ali? Ali, remember, was the son of his uncle, Abu Talib. Ali, at 5 years old, comes to live with Muhammad. Ali, Muhammad's older. Basically, there is a generation gap here, but really, Ali is Muhammad's cousin. Fatima is Muhammad's daughter, one of 4 daughters. Fatima, his favorite daughter. Ali marries Fatima. Ali, also an early follower when Muhammad began having his revelations. You could say Khadija, his wife, was the first follower. Ali, his cousin, almost adopted son. Zaid, literally his adopted son, that slave that rejected his freedom to stay with Muhammad. Actually, probably got his freedom, became adopted by Muhammad. Zaid, a follower of Muhammad. But to my knowledge, Zaid passed away. Ali also becomes Muhammad's son-in-law when Ali marries Fatima. So Ali, especially in terms of a blood relative, Ali is the closest, shall we say, descendant of Muhammad. And when Muhammad dies, there is a portion of his followers that believe that Ali should be the successor. Ali should be the successor. Now, the word for successor to Muhammad is actually the word caliph. I'll draw a line here because it's kind of a new topic, but I'm going to save the paper. Caliph is a title that basically means successor to Muhammad.
Here's what I found.
to Muhammad. What was that? To Muhammad. Muhammad, that's a you. Successor to Muhammad, the Caliph. And the followers of the Caliph become the Caliphate. So you'll see these words, keep up on current events. This is, we'll bring some of that up to date in the next lecture. But early on, there was this question of who would succeed Muhammad. Now, one option was Ali. Ali, the closest male descendant, sorry about that, the closest male descendant to Muhammad. And in the context of kings and emperors and some of those models, it was supposed to go to a blood descendant. There was another option, though, between Ali and his name, if you remember correctly, was Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr was an early follower. Abu Bakr was one of his influential followers. Abu Bakr remained a very close friend and ally. Abu Bakr, a leader with Muhammad, and Abu Bakr also will become Muhammad's father-in-law. Because if you remember correctly, keeping track of these names, that Muhammad dies in the arms of his wife. He did not have multiple wives. We'll talk about the issue of multiple wives in Islam in the next lecture as well. But these are all teases for what the next lecture is about, treatment of women and this issue of multiple wives. Muhammad didn't have multiple wives till after the death of Khadijah. That's always cited as the evidence of how loving that relationship was. But ultimately ends up marrying Abu Bakr's daughter, Aisha. So Abu Bakr, an early follower, an influential follower, when he didn't have a lot of influential followers, and in fact the Quraysh tribe was trying to ostracize, they didn't like what Muhammad was teaching, this issue of one God, when their business depends on people coming to worship the 360 idols in their shrine. Abu Bakr was an influential early follower. And Abu Bakr was, in effect, given the title of first caliph. It went, in a sense, based on merit. This becomes the Abu Bakr deserved to follow, to take over for Muhammad. This would be the ancestral. This is the merit determination. This would be the ancestral determination of who's to follow a leader. It went to Abu Bakr. A minority of followers. A minority of followers felt it should have gone to Ali. And they felt strongly that it should have gone to Ali. Now, and it doesn't even matter, by the way, that eventually Ali, I believe, became the fourth caliph. So Ali did get his turn, and Ali was assassinated. The first 11 caliphs were all assassinated. No one met a natural death. That's an interesting side note as we look at this. But what happens is that this group, this minority group, becomes, this is where you get this schism in Islam, Shia, the Shia are Shia Ali. It comes from the word followers of Ali. Shia, the Shia. The Sunni branch of Islam, this is the Shia branch of Islam, the Sunni branch of Islam. Notice the relationship. Sunni, basically from Sunnah. This is the traditional form, so to speak. This is the cultural norm. This went by merit. The Sunni were felt that Abu Bakr deserved to be the first caliph. And so you had this split between Shia and Sunni. These are the two main branches of Islam. And you could say that 1,400 years later, they're still fighting about it. The split goes back literally to who became the first caliph. And so today, what you have is, this is basically 10 to 15% of Islam. 10 to 15% of Muslims are Shia Muslims, Shia Islam. 85 to 90% are Sunni. The Shia Muslims tend to be concentrated. The two big countries who are Shia are Iran and Iraq. Now, Iran is basically totally Shia. Iraq is 55% Shia, 45% Sunni. In case you're not up on current events, we invaded, following 9/11, we ultimately invade Iraq. We topple Saddam Hussein, who was the Sunni leader, even though he was in the minority of a country that had a Shia majority. We toppled that leader. And I don't even know how to say this, but didn't really take into account the Shia-Sunni issue in the country. And we've inherited a mess ever since. I'm not sitting here saying Saddam Hussein was worth supporting. But we injected ourselves into a country. We're still trying to get out. This is America's longest war. This is a mess. And now you understand where it originates. It originates back with the death of Muhammad. This is one of the classic themes that we've had in this class. And you read it's alive in the paper today. Saudi Arabia is Sunni. Saudi Arabia, our ally. Iran, the issues in Iran. Iran, dominant, the biggest Shia country in the world. The issue of them getting nuclear weapons. This is what you're witnessing today. This is what's going on in the world today. And that's not to say that just because Shia are holding a grudge because Ali was not made the first caliph, that's the only issue between Shia and Sunni. But it's the original issue. This is the defining issue. What has happened over time is that you also have differences that have grown up over time. So, for example, the Shia are more rigid, traditional. Shia are more ruled. So, for example, there's a word in Islam, the word is imam. 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 In the Sunni culture, an imam is like a rabbi, meaning teacher. Imam is the leader of prayer in Sunnah, in the Sunni tradition. This is the leader of prayer. The prayer leader. It's anyone qualified, anyone capable. There's no, in the Sunni tradition, there's no ruling mosque. There's no hierarchical structure like there is in Catholicism. It's pretty hang loose. Each mosque is pretty independent. And the imam is who's leading the prayer service. In Shia, the word imam is, first of all, not designated to just anyone leading a prayer service. Imam in Shia is almost ruler. Imam is a major. The Imam, the Ayatollah Al-Khamenei, and the grand leader of Iran, is the Imam. This is a much bigger title. And Imam, you could say that Imam in Sunni has a little I, and Imam in Shia has a big capital I. It would be one way to kind of think about it. Sunni, a word for tradition. Culturally different. We talked about that up here. Shia, much more hierarchical, much more rigid, much more literal interpretation of the Quran, much more fundamental, much more in general. Always exceptions. Yeah. The war within Islam, just like there is a war between Christians and Muslims, some of these controversies are challenging and difficult. I do want to introduce you to one more branch of Islam, and it's a branch that I'm familiar with. The branch that I've had experience with. There is a branch called the Sufis. The Sufi branch of Islam. The Sufis, this is the mystical branch. The Sufis. Sufi is, sometimes people will call them lovers of God. With a teaching that it is our human love for each other that becomes the model and the prerequisite for our love of God. So that the Sufis, an order within Islam that is very mystical, is focuses on, this is where you will find meditation within Islam. They do a practice called zikr. I've done it many times. It's an ecstatic chanting practice where you really get high on the chant, chants to Allah, chants, and it's got that it's got a vibration to it that is it's powerful. Just the name zikr. You do a Sufi zikr and expect to get high without drugs. This is basically what's going on. I had the privilege of studying with. There is a Sufi order of the West. Centered, came from Europe, has there's a center in upstate New York called the Abode of the Message. It was founded by Pir Vilayat Inayat Khan, the son of Hazrat Inayat Khan. These are big philosophical names. Pir Vilayat was one of my Pir Vilayat in Islam. I've had his darshan. I realized as I'm doing this today, and I do these lectures over in my church, and I forgot, I meant to bring you a picture of Pir Vilayat. I will try and remember to open the next lecture with, just so you know who I'm talking about. A beautiful being. He radiated peace. He radiated love. A branch of the Sufi tradition is where you get the whirling dervishes. The dervishes this is an ecstatic dance practice where you are experiencing the divine. They wear the flat hats, and they have this a flowing robe, and they twirl. The only way I can relate to this is when you were a kid, sometimes you would, you watch a child just spin around, fall on the floor, and laugh because they get dizzy, and dizzy is a form of high. And so the dervishes just getting off on that ecstatic dance of just dancing in the presence of the divine, tuning into the divine. There used to be at Grateful Dead concerts. Your professor attended his share. At Grateful Dead concerts, from the stage, back right, if you turned from the stage and looked out, in the back right, there were always a group of twirlers. We called them the twirlers. There must have been 50 people that at every Grateful Dead concert would twirl the whole concert, spinning. There's a whole technique to it, which one technique is one thumb. A thumb, I think this is out of the picture, but you would put one arm out this way with your thumb up, and the other one out with your hand up. And then you would spin, and you spun. When the thumb was up, you spun backwards to the thumb, and you twirled in the same direction. You just twirled, and it was fun. Challenging not to get so dizzy that you can't stand up. This is if you watch a ice skater twirl. How do they not get dizzy? How could they skate afterwards? Interesting issue. There are secrets. First of all, you do get used to it. Your brain gets used to it. Secondly, so it takes practice. Secondly, you can't let the image of what's twirling, that's what throws off your brain. You got to be able to find a fixed point somewhere. Balance and focus are intertwined, so there's got to be a way to focus. One of the ways is to focus inside. These are all some of the challenges of twirling. Sufis, if you ever get a chance, if there's a Sufi meeting, united through the heart. When I said lovers of God, just love. Love is at the essence of the Sufi tradition. To love each other, to love ourselves, to love God, and let it show. This is where I've had my some powerful Islamic experiences. Branches of Islam. That's, since I have a few more minutes, if I were in class, I would want to take advantage of them. And since I just talked about Sufism, let me take a minute to just go. We're winding down. This is the fifth of our 5 major religions. You've had Hinduism and Buddhism and Judaism, Christianity, and now Islam. They all have a prayer component. They all have, in Hinduism, the prayers, the puja, the services, the service of in service of the divine, praying to the divine in the form of their chosen deity. Buddhism, not so much intercessional, although Mahayana Buddhism will become more devotional. And so there are aspects within Buddhism. But Hinduism and Buddhism all centering in really strongly in meditation. And we talked about prayer in Judaism, prayer to the Creator. We have the same thing. We didn't get into it too much in Christianity, but clearly you're expected to go to church and pray. You're encouraged to pray, and I gave you. I want to focus for a moment again on the model I gave you. It's kind of Larry's model for prayer, which involves 3, because I put 2 together, 3 elements to prayer. The first is asking for help, asking for to get out of this mess, asking for healing, asking for peace, asking to win the lottery. Here's that a lot. Asking the divine, asking for help. Always sounds like I'm making fun of it a little. I'm not. It gives people hope when they're down, the courage to keep going, hope when there's despair. Asking that you're not alone. It assumes you're not alone. And I want to talk about that again in a moment. The 3 levels were asking, and then praise and gratitude, and then listening. In Judaism, the Shema, listen and hear. Hear the oneness of God. In Islam, the prayer 5 times a day with the rakas and the choreography. Heavily in Islam on praise and gratitude. This is what they're the prescribed prayers. A prayer called the takbir, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. God is great. God is great. This is the Shahada. There is no God but God. This is where the emphasis is. Christianity, we asking for forgiveness from sin, asking for to be saved from original sin, to be washed by the sacrifice of Jesus. Asking in the East a little more the meditative traditions. And you have seen that actually all 3 of these are in all of the ones that we have talked about. All of them. These are the elements of prayer. And what I want to share with you today is I want to share with you the fact that these are also the elements in a relationship. So whether you know it or not, so this is now one of my regression, where I'm wandering off into your life. Whether you know it or not, all relationships start with a question. It surprises people sometimes. This issue of asking. Someone, you don't realize it, but someone had to ask if you wanted to go out for coffee. Someone had to ask for your phone number. Someone has to ask. It might be a question in the supermarket. Where is the broccoli? And a conversation starts up. All relationships start with a question. Now, important to understand, not all questions end in a relationship. The opposite is not true. However, this is powerful. This is powerful. It's how we learn. It's how we learn. I gave a commencement address once at Western Reserve Academy. I focused on this. I called it the 3-letter secret to success. Learn how to ask. Ask. We have in the Bible, ask and ye shall be given. Seek and ye shall find. Ask. It's a magical word. Ask when you don't know. I like to joke about this. Listen, guys. Men can ask for directions. I know that that's a bit of a contradiction to our gender makeup, but you can ask for directions. Asking is a powerful word. You need to ask it. If you salespeople have to ask for the order. You have to ask for money when you're trying to collect on a bill. Asking. Powerful. Important. First level in a relationship. I do put these in a certain order. First level in here's the problem. You can't stay at that level. Between two people, one can't always be doing the asking and the other always the martyring. It's going to get tiring. It can't be all about you. When you move to the second level of in a relationship, this is about thank yous and compliments. Compliments. Thank yous and compliments. It deepens a relationship. It's not all about you. When you acknowledge the other person, words like I love you. I tell my couples every day. That's homework. You have to reaffirm it every day. Each one of you wants to hear it from the other person. You want that affirmation. Compliments. Thank yous. When relationships start to take people for granted, when you stop thanking people for the things they do that you appreciate, when you stop thanking people for going to work every day, helping to support the 2 of you or the 5 of you or whatever it is. Thank yous and compliments, they deepen a relationship. It's not stable if you stay here. This is important. But the third level of a relationship, when the relationship is really functioning on a deeper level, that's about the listening. Can you hear each other? Listening and prayer. Does it mean a still small voice will speak to you in English and tell you everything you want to know whenever you want to know it? Look, I tell you in the form of meditation I teach that if you don't listen, you're not going to hear anything. So you might as well listen. Who knows what you'll hear? And by the way, it doesn't mean a still small voice will speak to you. One of my teachings is that the world is speaking to you. The world gives us suffering as a message. We get feedback. Hear what the world, when things are going poorly, do we not listen? That's that classic, if you keep doing what you've always done, you'll keep getting what you've always gotten, and then you'll wonder how that ever happened to you. You're not paying attention. You're not listening. Listen. That's the powerful element of the second level of my meditation teachings. And when it comes to each other, can you hear each other? Can you listen beyond the words? It's not always the words. I joke with my couples for weddings. It's not about the toothpaste cap. One complaining all the time that the other one doesn't put the toothpaste cap on the toothpaste tube. That's just a metaphor. What they're really saying is, I don't know that you love me. I doubt your love because you can't even put the toothpaste cap on for me. Fear and doubt. That's what's often behind the words. And excitement. When someone gets excited, are you the elected person that rains on their parade? Tries to bring some realistic take to it? Let someone be excited. Get excited with. Hear their excitement. Don't hear the idea as half-baked as it might be. There's always time to flush it out. There's always time before you have to write a check. Be excited for them and with them. Hear the hopes and dreams. Hear the fears and the doubts. When someone comes home from work and is complaining about their boss, they don't necessarily want a solution. They want your sympathy. They want you to hear their frustration. This is the most powerful level of communication in a relationship. Work on that. Be able to hear yourself, what you want and need. So often we don't listen. It gets drowned in the busyness of what we're doing. Listen to yourself. Listen to the people you care about. Go beyond the words. That's what we're doing in meditation. I would argue that's in all of the religions we have looked at. That's that transition from religion to spirituality. Tune in. Listen. I'll get down off my soapbox. There's one more official lecture. The fourth of 4 on Islam will come. Will be the last lecture. We are going to look at the treatment of women. We're going to look at some of the issues we're looking at today, in particular this concept of jihad. Sometimes you'll learn more about it in the next lecture, sometimes defined as holy war. There's going to be much more to the story than that. So one more lecture on Islam. We'll get to the summary. We'll look at that summary again as well. And then you'll be ready for the test on Islam. There will be one last lecture after the Islam lecture in which I will review all 5 religions. So stay tuned for that one. Have a great day. Stay safe. Keep your family safe.